We'll hear from Graham. You know Graham as a recent addition to the school as a assistant professor. So he's going to give a quick talk about his experiences of his own journey to securing first research funding.
Okay,
Thanks very much. Thank you. Yeah, just a few words about myself. I see familiar faces, but some of you I don't know. So my name is Katja McDonough and I work in the research office. I look after SFI calls and Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, SEI calls. And at the moment I'm also the interim contact person for IRC calls, Irish Research Council calls. Okay, so we are waiting for a number of new staff to join our team. So, but I suppose in the meantime queries do come in, so it's kind of it's quite busy. So I apologize if I delay in my responses. Yeah. So as Cathal pointed out, so there was this idea of kind of doing a more tailored session about funding opportunities for the school, and I kind of had a few ideas on how to structure. And I just want to, and I see Cathal sent multiple reminders this morning for people to come in. So it's like no pressure, Katja. There will be a lot of people coming in. So I kind of felt very, very nervous straight away. But no, delighted to see you here. Yeah, so I suppose a bit of a disclaimer that this is just the beginning, the start. The funding, how to search for a funding opportunity. It's like doing research basically, and looking for that perfect funding opportunity. So this session is just basically a tip of the iceberg of how to approach the variety of funding opportunities that are out there, and what things do you have to think about. Okay, and please do not start first with the you saw a call and you're like, oh, that would be great to apply for this call. You need to start with something else first, okay? Because then you'll be shoehorning your idea into the, you need to start with the idea first. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. So before I start and go on with the slides, can I just ask you maybe each of you to say a few words about yourself, where you're from, obviously School of Computing, but whether you are attached to any of the centres, and if you're a PhD student, what year you're on the PhD register, and whether you had any experience with grant writing, and what was the result of that experience, okay? So, Catherine, maybe can we just start with you, please?
So my name is Catherine Mulwa. I'm a postdoc in the School of Computing. In 2017 November, I got a small funding under the IRC. Currently, I'm looking at developing mobile-based applications to support vulnerable students within the Irish institutions by providing them recommendations when they're interacting with different websites or different education applications. And that's me.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
I'm John, I'm also postdoc here, and so now I'm working on our BI project on code accounting and analytics.
So you're a member of a team for that project, okay. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I am Sean, I'm a second year PhD with Insight. I've applied twice for IRC funding for PhD, I got it the second time. This year I applied for Fulbright, didn't get it.
Okay. PhD, the PhD call in IRC?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, great.
I'm Owen. I'm a one year into a postdoc in the School of Computing, working on the Asgard project. No experience applying for funding.
Okay, but you are working on a funded project. Asgard is the Age 2020, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Piyush, and I work in the Adapt Center. And I'm I've been working as a postdoctoral researcher for the last 6 months, and I kind of wrote a proposal in one of the work package for the Age 2020 projects. But we recently got the results. I guess it got rejected or something.
Okay.
So it's getting some new experience of how to write work packages and all these things.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Thank you. If you could just maybe start with this role first.
I'm Teresa. I'm a research fellow at the Adapt Centre, and I got a Fulbright a few years ago. I'm funded from the Department of the Gaeltacht, so I was awarded 600,000 over 4 years for the project. So I'm 1 year into that. But I've also applied for things like Ulysses, and I didn't get that.
I know, don't get me started on Ulysses. Yeah. I'm trying to figure out.
Give you feedback.
Yes, it's a very difficult one. Yeah.
Again.
Yeah.
and I've helped out with a couple of the CEF funding.
Okay,
funds, yeah,
yes,
and that-
okay,
they've
okay.
both been successful.
Okay,
But I
great.
wouldn't claim, I mean, Andy was mostly part of it.
Okay, yeah. But sometimes even being involved in that process, you know,
Yeah,
actually
there's that.
seeing from what you need to do, you
Yeah.
actually do a lot of learning. Yeah, great, thank you.
I have Rory O'Connor, the head of School of
Oh.
Computing here.
Yep.
I'm affiliated with DCU Research Centre, and I suppose I have a long and glorious history of failed grant proposals behind me, proving that, you know, no matter how far advanced you are in your career, there's always something else to learn, I think.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm here. My most recent grant with one of my colleagues here, Paul Mark, was a DTF of 1.2 million.
Okay, yeah, which
was great, but was basically a recycled proposal from previous H2020 work.
Yeah,
as is the way.
yeah. Have you heard that story? There's a guy in Princeton University who, on his personal webpage, he listed all his achievements, but he also listed the list of all his unsuccessful projects that he applied for, and he was claiming that, you know, this is actually that a huge effort went into, you know, producing those applications. So in a way, even if the outcome was negative, you know, it still shows that I'm trying, and you know, so I think that's, you know, I actually advise everyone to do that, at least to have that people are trying, which is great. Yeah.
As a hiring manager, I see that a lot on CVs sometimes here, and I think it's a good tactic.
Yes,
It shows you're actually doing something.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and like, you know, the stats there that, you know, a lot of funding applications get funded on the second or third submission. So it's very rarely when everyone gets funded on the first. So like, you know, keep on trying. Yeah, Marcus.
Okay, so yeah, I'm Marcus Helfert, also here from the School of Computing, and I'm mainly involved in DERO and ADAPT Research Center, and also a long list of experience with unsuccessful proposals. Like I probably, if I would have to do a web page, it would be really long, couple years. But I also have some funding success, and exactly as we said, that basically it was the third submission on a Marie Curie ETN training network proposal, so that we were successful. I'm the coordinator. And also another one, a Marie Curie co-fund proposal. So on the various schemes, I have experience as partner, but also now as coordinator.
Great, thank you.
Hi, I'm Shayla. I'm a postdoc at ADAPT Center. I have helped with a few proposals, but mostly directly in the work package part. Those ones were not successful. I applied for a global Marie Curie this last call. Wasn't successful. I also applied for an IRC, and I'm thinking like, what else can I do, and you know, use the feedback that they gave to me to make the proposal better.
Okay, yeah, great.
I'm Marco. I'm a research fellow here with Liro, and I got Marie Curie fellowship, so I applied for that. And back in Italy, by around October, back in Italy, I was applying to some EU funding with Erasmus mainly. And since around October, I just applied for a travel support grant that was successful. It's
the EI one.
But I want to build on top of that.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Yeah, hi.
I'm Joe from the DAP Center as a postdoc. And I have tried the Royal Society fellowship. And not successful, and several others. And I mainly work on low-resource languages.
Okay.
At the moment, and try to have some funding on this.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
I'm Alistair. I'm a lecturer here in School of Computing. I've applied for quite a number of grants over the years, and I've been successful with IRC grants. I've had a few of those, postgraduate ones. I've got a couple of Marie Curies, and I got one SFI grant a long time ago.
Brilliant, yeah, great. Fiona?
I'm
Hi.
I'm a final year PhD here in the School of Computing.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Felix. I'm a postdoc in ADAPT. I have some experience in applying for company-wide grants like FP and FP7, and also in R&D, national applications in Portugal. And now I have an Edge Fellowship, Marie Curie co-fund.
Okay, yeah. Do you want to say?
I've never applied for
Okay, good to know. Yeah, Maria, I think you. Maria,
I thought a little bit on.
I'm Maria. I'm a lecturer here in School of Computing. I applied for some fundings usually with other colleagues. So I'm hoping I'll be able to apply for some on my own in the future, particularly IRC. I had ERCSET for
yes,
for my own PhD. I applied for some fundings which colleagues already mentioned, such as Merit Career for PhD students, SFI, ADAPT for fintech.
Okay, so you have a bit of experience with the different calls. Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Yeah, great to see that there is definitely experience in applying for grants and even searching. Like I'm sure you all do your own searches, and there is really another disclaimer. There's really like not one magic formula of how to find it. So it does involve a lot of trawling and browsing and finding that opportunity. And like if you're interested in kind of having a more tailored one-to-one meetings with kind of that you would like to develop a funding plan for the next 6 or 12 months, I'd be happy to meet with you then on a one-to-one basis, and we can we can then work on the schedule. Yeah, because the planning is essential. Because things are so competitive, you can't really afford of kind of doing a last-minute jobs just because it's going to be a wasted effort and so on. So. Yeah, so this is just a brief overview, and again, I mean, we will try to keep this very informal. So if you have any questions as I talk, do.
Will you send us?
I will. Yes, I will. Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of start with the the understanding, with a kind of more general idea of understanding the funding landscape, and then how to go about finding and assessing various funding opportunities. I will talk through a number of current funding opportunities, but also calls that are closed at the moment, but they will be opening soon or within the next 6 or 7 months. So again, to kind of keep an eye on them and maybe do a bit of preparation for them. Research professionals, so again, that's something that, if we have time, we can do something. But again, if, I was chatting to my colleague Isabel Hidalgo in our office, and she'd be happy again to come to the school and give a kind of a session just on research professional. We can do a little demo. People can prepare their research topics that they would like to to develop and find funding, and then we can do that as well. So also collaboration, because I think it's one of the best ways to start applying for funding. I think as a partner, as a collaborator, because you learn with the kind of more senior members of staff, and then you get all that knowledge. So again, I'll give you some ideas of how to find those collaborators, how to partner on various projects, and then again in terms of DCU processes and supports. Again, I have a few slides on that in terms of what can we do for you. My colleagues, what do they do, and so on. So we can have a chat about that as well. So just on a kind of lighter note, I just wanted to start with this, that things are definitely more difficult now. Okay, so it used to be that professors, lecturers, academics, a long time ago, they had an idea, they and that was kind of enough, because you produced that idea and you were given all this sort of the resources and so on to implement it further. Yeah, whereas now idea is not enough. You have a brilliant idea, but resources in higher education institutions are quite limited. So you do need to, in order to develop that and to prove to everybody that this idea is actually worthwhile to research and have a research program, you need to raise money for it. So this is just the reality, and obviously people do not agree with this formula, but this is just how things are. Okay, so we can and it all goes back to the government, how much the government gives us money and how the money are channeled to the universities. And now we're experiencing quite a shortage of funds coming in from the government. So so that's why it's kind of like it's one of those things that just has to be done. So in terms of the funding, yeah. So and again, this is kind of the three truths of funding, that there is definitely funding available out there. Okay, but also there is it's very competitive. There's a lot of competition for it. and the competition rises with each year. Okay, even if you compare different, submission stats and success stats, you could actually see that it's more and more difficult. So that's why I think, doing that preparation and doing that background research about the funding opportunity, and figuring out for yourself first whether this is the right call for you, it's one of the crucial points to start. Yeah. So because there's no point continuing starting working on application when you halfway through you realize that you're actually not eligible, or you might not have good chances. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. So just again to show you the variety of funding we get, from various types of funders in DCU. So, and these are all the funders that you've mentioned during your introductions. So we have national funders, SFI, Enterprise Ireland, IRC, and then we have UK-based ones, the Wellcome Trust, and then we have European funding sources. So a number of programs in Horizon 2020, which is the top-down calls, which are societal challenges, for instance, or ERC, or the Marie Skłodowska-Curie calls. So and then we also get funding from a variety of non-commercial organizations, so be it charities or organizations non-for-profit. So the funding is usually smaller, but they do have funding, and they do have certain research problems to investigate. That's why they put out the calls there, and researchers then make their applications. And also we get quite a bit of funding from the governmental departments and various agencies. There are like statutory agencies that are half funded by the government and not. So there is that as well. And again, just to give you a kind of a flavor for, how many funders, how many various types of funders are out there. So this is, for instance, the kind of number of funding awards by funder category. Okay, so in 2017, 2018, and as expected, the most of our awards do come from, about 60% do come from the national funding agencies. So this would be IRC, EI, SCEI, SFI, and so on. Okay. We do get, and then it's kind of 22% sort of non-commercial enterprise. Various types of funders, they typically fund kind of research, contract research, collaborative agreements and so on. And then commercial enterprise, so this will be your industries and enterprise partners, companies, SMEs, and so on. And quite a small one from charities, organizations with charitable status. So there's quite a wealth of, and I'm sure again, you all have, so if you think about the industry partner or industry funder, you think about the big guys there that now, fund, various schemes and so on. So that's again just to give you an indication. And again, in terms of applying for funding, in terms of how do we do as an institution. Again, 2018, 677 applications. This is our TORA data, okay? So TORA is our institutional application portal where all applications have to go. So the 677 application doesn't mean that there are no more applications, because basically 677 are those that were uploaded on TORA, okay? There might be some other ones that were out there. So this is just the main disclaimer. But out of the data that we know of, so this is the applications, we got 247 awards. So, really, really, small, less than half, less than 35%, or so. So. Undoubtedly, the process is quite hard. Okay, it's very competitive, and that's why sort of finding that right call, understanding the funder requirements, and sort of how to pitch your research idea, how to sell it for if you want to use even that word, are all key to success. And rejections, I mean, rejections is something that obviously you are devastated, yeah, when you get that sort of that dreadful letter that you've been unsuccessful. But again, try to use it kind of to your advantage. Sometimes funders' evaluation feedback is helpful, and I've talked to people, and they did say that it actually helped them to focus their idea a bit more, to maybe take a different angle, especially if that has been picked up by a number of reviewers. So in a way, it's a kind of like a peer review. Because I mean, mostly these proposals are evaluated by academics, by internationally your peers, internationally based, and resubmit. I'm all for repurposing, recycling the proposals, and so on. So definitely make sure that it's not wasted, and there's nothing wrong with it. Yeah. So because I mean, you invested your time into writing something, so definitely fine. So it's just that kind of thing of how to find that right call. And also, again, I think you need to be a bit more strategic, and in a way, and again, I work in this in this area for more than 5 years, okay, and I realize that even if some calls are quite regular, sometimes funders drop calls, okay? So for instance, if you think that, that there would be the next IRC laureate starting and consolidator, it's actually, we don't know if it's going to happen, even despite the fact that they were saying, when they were launching the call that, they got funding from the government for at least 5 years. So now the signs are, if you looked at the IRC funding calendar for 2019, the starting and consolidator type of the grants are actually not there, not listed. So I queried that with the council, and they basically said they didn't get a commitment from the government, which means that they basically don't have money. So they're trying to lobby the government now to get that. So I suppose my point here is that you need to be strategic. So for instance, it might be the case, especially if you're doing your PhD, busy, with your project, you do tutorials, you do a bit of teaching as well to gain experience. You might think that funding is something that I'll do in the next couple of years, but I actually think you might not need money now, and you definitely, if you are to pursue the career in academia, you'll definitely need to apply for funding. So one way to start, even if you are, in year 3 or year 4 of your PhD, it might be a good idea to actually start learning now. Yeah, even if you don't get funded first time around, you might get funded the next one. And by the time when you actually have a research idea in your mind and you know what you want to do, you will be able to get it, okay? So just think a little bit in the medium term and longer term. Another thing that we kind of increasingly see in the way funders frame their calls and frame their eligibility criteria is that they do like to see track records in research funding, okay? And it's a kind of a little bit like, okay, so, but if I'm only a PhD, I obviously don't have that track record. How will I get it? So that's another thing that, sometimes it can be explicit, so you won't be able to apply for a call if you don't have any competitively acquired grant. So you basically can't. So even if, and any types of grants matter, yeah? So even if it's a travel grant, if it's a small seed money funding, that will count as competitively acquired. If you went through competition, that would be count. Or sometimes it's implicit, okay? So this is obviously quite difficult to prove, but you see from those successful applications that people did get funded, track record does matter, okay? So that, that you actually have, you got a grant before, you have experience in sort of application writing, but also delivering on, all of those promises that you've done in the proposal. So when you are already done the project. Learning curve, definitely. So and I'm sure you all probably experienced that, even from the point of view that what's involved in the process. Even, if it's an online submission system, the second time you're doing it, you know exactly, what's required, okay? You know exactly how the system works. And I mean, funders don't help, sometimes those online submission systems are absolute nightmare. I don't know if they do it deliberately to deter more applicants or something, or but it's just it's very complicated. The handbooks that they provide are usually 50 pages plus that you have to, to kind of flick through to find the solution to your particular technical problem. That why not? And sometimes they have glitches, technical glitches. So, like as you all know from the School of Computing, systems are not perfect. So they do have some glitches. So research mobility. So this is another thing that we can see now is increasingly the funders like to see that. Okay, so that basically, if you have a PhD from one institution, you are kind of expected to move institutions in your postdoc, okay? So that you go somewhere else to do your postdoc, or if you've done PhD and a postdoc, that you will spend some time, a number of years in a different institution, and even better in a different country, okay? So even further field in a non-EU countries in the States or Australia, or so. And this is all about this idea about international, intersectoral, and sort of interdisciplinary mobility of researchers, so that we can kind of prepare them for the future, and that they get this diverse set of skills, they get these experiences, they get experiences of research and innovation systems in other countries, especially the ones where we, if there's something to learn from them. So this is important, okay? Like I know especially for the IRC postdocs, if anyone is thinking about, it's very, very hard to get an IRC postdoc with the same institution where you've done your PhD. It's not impossible. I've seen cases where people did get it, but in those cases, and they were in minority, it basically was sort of argued, and it was true that DCU is the center of excellence in that particular area of expertise. There is no alternative institution in Ireland or in Europe. So in that case, the applicant was able to successfully argue the case that it makes sense to stay in the same institution because they have the network, they have the support, they have the expertise. Okay, but in general, it's better to, and even later on when you move on in your careers and you get your academic posts, and you even then when you apply for your Future Frontiers program in SFI and so on, they will be looking at your track record, international mobility as well. So, and as we are all, we all have our lives outside academia, and sometimes there's only certain periods in your lives where you are actually mobile, where you can go and travel. Once you settle down, it's quite difficult. So later on, it's difficult to do it. Okay, so use it when you don't have those attachments, when you're not attached, just to get it, use it to your advantage in that particular. And that again requires planning. You just need to, to think about it. Okay, so this is just again in terms of types of funding, and I just wanted to kind of list that again, and this categorization will help you when you're reading a call. You can kind of maybe, figure out, okay, this is the conference funding, or this is the sort of collaborative grant, so I need collaborators for this, or this is an individual fellowship, okay, so this is just a sort of it's all about me. So individual fellowships are about the idea, but also about the growing of the fellowship, of the fellow, developing of the fellow, okay, so that it's not only about idea, but about your career and training development plan on what are you going to do throughout those 2 years of the fellowship. Conference, commercialization funding, okay? So this is, again, you can't apply for a CF funding in EI, for instance, if you have a really like a basic idea with TRL 1, okay? So it must be something that is already further developed, and you are kind of ready to either launch the product, or you need that kind of extra funding to be able to go to market with it, with your solution, with your service, with your platform. And then sort of the research projects, so these are kind of usually PI-led, where you have a lead PI, principal investigator, lead academic, and then what usually happens is that lead PIs hire members of research team who help this person to carry out the activities of the project. which is also, again, it's great, and I see some of you are involved in those projects. That is, it's a great learning as well to see, to see how funding works from the post-award perspective. Yeah, so what actually happens when you get the money, because that's a completely new chapter. You think that you get the funding and that's it. You can do it, but it's there's a whole lot of other things that requirements and so on in terms of project implementation. And I suppose, again, another things to consider, so eligibility, obviously, that's an obvious one, but funding levels, very often, sometimes people don't need a lot of money, but then they see, okay, the call is, so the maximum funding that the person can apply for is 500K, and I often get these questions, okay, what if I don't need 500K, can I apply? And I suppose this is something, it's tricky, yeah? You just need to maybe do a bit of research in terms of, okay, which projects have been funded in the past by some funder, and maybe, and usually this is because of the, freedom of information and so on, the funders are required to make that information public, about the funding project. So some funders are better than others in releasing that information, and maybe there might be a time lag when you actually get that information, but some are, and we in the research office, we do try to push funders to actually give us information about the funded projects, and also break down per Irish-based higher education institution how many, because that's all it shouldn't be hidden, but. So sometimes, and I've seen cases where people were able to get, they wanted to apply for less. So instead of, for instance, if the max funding is 400K, they were actually able to argue that they need 200K, okay? And sometimes I kind of warn people and I say, look, the funder might see that your project is not ambitious enough, okay? That, because you're not applying for the full amount, the funder might, or an evaluators might actually think maybe it's not the right call. But I did see cases where people, did request less, and even, I remember I had meetings with them and I say, look, I'm actually not sure, and actually that person got funded, so it was completely contrary to my advice. But it's an interesting, because it seems that, it's easier to find 200K than 400K for a funder, okay? So funders get the pot of money from, especially if we're talking about the national funders, they get money from the government, and obviously if they have some leftovers, or if some people did not take up their awards, it's actually easier to find smaller projects. Obviously, that also goes through the process, and the evaluators were happy in general with the idea and so on. But the funding amount, maybe that's one of the one of the ways of how to maximize your successes. Don't ask to the very maximum. If you have enough, if you'll have for what you're set out to do, what you plan to do, and if you'll have enough for 2/3 of that maximum limit, that might be good. To actually go and it will be actually good that you just justify that you don't need the full amount. And top down, bottom up, so it's open calls basically, where you can propose any topics, and then it's sort of top down where the topic is prescribed. You can argue that the top down might be a bit easier, because at least you don't have to think about it. You can you have the specification of the problem or research challenge and so on, and you kind of can but the problem is that those topics usually are formulated in a very broad way as well, so which is again difficult to figure out what exactly, and usually the expected impacts are formulated again in a very vague way. So so I don't think that there's one is definitely better than the other. It all depends. So, and I suppose this is kind of the key stages, okay? A proposal that has already been submitted, so you kind of have your idea already, and then you try to find your funding source. So and then you need to think about your planning and budgets. What resources do you need to carry out the project, and then obviously writing and submitting. So that's kind of goes with it. So in terms of the kind of, and again, this is only a snapshot of funding opportunities, okay? So it's definitely, so I just kind of looked at, what's open at the moment, and I can flag that with people, and, I'd be happy to have a chat with you if you have any specific questions. But we have one that is now currently open, SFI's Frontier for the Future program. So deadline for pre-proposals is 28th of March at 1 p.m. Don't ask me why they do that, why they put the 1 p.m. as a submission times, because sometimes people think, oh yeah, sure, it's 28th of March, 5 p.m. and then they're late, But yeah, so this is a highly awaited scheme. Yeah, everyone was waiting for it. They basically combined the two previous schemes that SFI ran, the CGA Career Development Award and the investigators into one. Okay, so and it's for the sort of high risk projects, sort of with high impact, high reward. There's two strands. You can apply for a smaller project that is called Future Frontiers for projects, and then a kind of a bigger ones. Now, they introduced a number of key elements to the scheme. I'm running an info session on that on the 4th of March. So if you're free at that time, do come along, and I'll be talking only about that scheme. But yeah, so there are a number of, and SFI claimed that they listened to researchers, and they kind of came up with this funder. But from what I've been talking to people, people are still unhappy because, for instance, postdocs can't apply for the scheme. Okay, only sort of members of staff that are permanent, that are on contracts that with sufficient duration can apply. They introduced this emerging investigator category, which is again, quite useful for people who had a career break due to various reasons, so that they are kind of facilitated to enter the academic center again. And then, they say excellent female applicants are supporters. And the way how they constructed this is that basically, so if there are two applicants with the same evaluation score, and one is female and male, so the female will be bumped up if there is a funding for it. Okay, so that's the kind of, that's how they try to encourage. Yeah, and then another thing. So there's some eligibility criteria about for how many years you need to hold your PhD. So there must be a lead applicant, but also there could be co-applicants. Okay, and the co-applicants actually must have a PhD for at least 3 years. I already had some queries, and people, even if they are 2.5 years, they can't unfortunately apply as a co-applicant. There's another one that is, SFI has a lot of rolling schemes, and so there's a lot of them, okay? So, for the cohort here, I kind of thought that, it might not be of relevance, but they have another, the SFI Industry Fellowship. So this is, again, especially if your research area kind of straddles, between the academia and non-academia, and you would like to get that experience in the industry. So this is something that you might consider. So it's currently closed, but it's a regular scheme, so it usually opens in autumn, and it's a kind of temporary placement of academic researchers in industry, and then vice versa. So industry researchers that work in R&D departments in companies, they can come to university, to spend some time, and it also can be done on a part-time or full-time basis, which is again can suit some people, some circumstances. SFI Discover. So this is something that there's actually recently the SFI launched the successful projects of the SFI Discover call from last year. We've got 5 of them actually, DCU. We've done quite well, and this is again might not be relevant in your area, but if you are, but it basically funds projects for STEM education and public engagement. But again, even if you don't see that direct connection, it might be funders are increasingly care about public engagement and sort of going to the general public and disseminating results about your research, and therefore maximizing your impact, societal impact. So even if you don't see that direct connection, there might be maybe down the line you might want to do something with the public. You might want to go to schools and to do something, focus groups or something. And this could be quite a good and quite a doable scheme. So the application form is not terribly long, and you get your 50K. So there's a number of the amounts vary, and you can. It's quite a doable, small enough project. That might be again, that will be all again that sort of your track record. Enterprise Ireland. So so again, just flying through this. So Enterprise Ireland, have a number of calls, okay? So they have the kind of large program called Commercialization Fund, okay? And they have a commercial case feasibility grant, and then they have Commercialization Fund project support, innovation vouchers, innovation partnerships. So these are all kind of different types, but the idea is that basically for those research projects where you would like to commercialize, the outcome of your research or something, this is something that you should consider. My colleague Kieran Dwyer looks after EI and those types of funding. So if you have an idea, do get in touch with him. The thing is that what to keep in mind is that with commercialization funds in EI, you do need to engage with, first of all, the tech transfer officers in Invent. The relevant one. We have 3 according to each specialization, but also engagement with EI is crucial. So even at the application stage, at the stage of idea generation, so it would be good to, EIs like that kind of approach that, that you get in touch with them, they will meet you, they will actually come out, we see them very often in Invent, they will actually come out to Invent and they will have a chat with you about your idea. And that prior engagement with the funder is actually, we see that people who engaged actually get funded, so that's important. So that's something that, don't just go in, and sometimes after some track record, if you had already some funds, you might be invited by EI to submit, an application if they have a certain need that they would like to fund. So that's something that we see increasingly that, and again, requires some planning, okay? So, even if maybe for this deadline you might not be ready, but for the next one you will, yeah? And then I'm sure you know about this. So the EI has a number of Horizon 2020 support grants, okay, that you can apply. And so these are small enough money, up to 12K for the support coordinator support. And that basically helps you to prepare an H2020 proposal and submit. It's a very doable scheme. People get them all the time. In terms of the support, you can hire a consultant to help you write the bid. You can hire a research assistant to do a desk research, for preliminary data for your project, for the proposal for the H2020. So something that the prior contact with NCP, National Contact Point, for the challenge that you're going for. So if it's an ICT call, so it's Stephen O'Reilly, who is, quite approachable. You can give him a shout and you can, talk to him about your idea. But prior contact with the relevant NCP is crucial, because EI, when they try to make a decision about those support grants, they will get in touch with an NCP. And in general, NCPs are quite, approachable. They are there for, to basically maximize the number of applications coming and awards, H2020 awards coming into to Ireland. The recent trends, EI seems like they've been more liberal with this grant in the past at the beginning of H2020, and now I see they become more and more strict. I don't know, maybe that's just because they are running out of funding, but the way they have 10-week deadline before the H2020 call. So before they were kind of, liberal, you could have applied even if you're late by 1 or 2 weeks, but now they're quite strict. So basically if you're late, you can't apply for a coordinator. So again, keep that in mind if you're thinking. So you basically need to apply for that at least 10 weeks before the H2020 deadline. So they seem to be a bit getting stricter, and there's a proper review. So yeah, and there is an ERC support grant. Okay, so this is something that, again, if you're thinking about applying for a starter or a consolidator or indeed advanced, you can get a small. It's up to 8K, I think. And again, you get support from a consultant in terms of interview, because the ERCs, you need to go through an interview or a proposal, and so on. So supports are there, and I think people should use them. RIS Research Council. So in terms of sort of postdoctoral fellowships, and I know a few people here had, so this is again a regular call, usually happens in autumn each year. So usually kind of opens at the end of September with a deadline in November. So it's quite a tight time frame. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. So it is quite competitive. It's because they have a lot of applications, and the money is really, really bad. Okay, the fellowships, the actual salaries are absolutely laughable. So you just think that how can someone survive on those? And I actually had some people laughed at me when they asked, so what's the salary if I'm going to get a postdoc? And they said, okay, I'll go to industry because I'll get much more there. So
do they not realize that this doesn't work in our domain?
The IRC?
Yeah.
Yes, and we did say to them, and I suppose their answer is that this is what we get, and I suppose they get applications in, the way. So it's not that it's an undersubscribed call. People still go for it. So I suppose they don't feel the need that they need to do something with the, yeah. So. One of the things that I would like to flag, and that's something that maybe for more senior member of staff who have PhD students or maybe have very good undergraduate students and would like to do something. So there is the enterprise partnership scheme. Okay, so this is basically where PhD and at the PhD level and the postdoc level, where the candidates would spend some time in industry, in enterprise, in non-academic sector, and then they will spend some time in the university. So this is again, now the catch here is the enterprise partner will have to co-fund 1/3 of the fellowship, but it's not a big money for a company, because effectively they are getting a member of staff who could do research for them. Okay, so that's something that IRC funds 2/3 of those fellowships, and the enterprise partner funds 1/3. Now, enterprise here is viewed quite broadly. So obviously, enterprise as a commercial enterprise, but also non-governmental organizations, governmental departments. They are also seen as enterprise. GSO, statistics office, or anything. So you can actually go and do fellowships with them. The employment-based PhD scheme is also good, because it basically allows a PhD student to be based in the non-academic sector, having a supervisor in a university, and basically working and at the same time researching their topic. So again, that might actually help some people to get that that necessary set of skills. I also wanted to flag sometimes IRC advertises various calls for ERA-nets. Okay, ERA-nets are basically a type of EU funding that are co-funded. So part of the money are provided by the European Union, and part of the money are provided by the national research organizations. Yeah, so for instance, for the Irish participation in ERA-net is usually funded by the IRC. And this one, now, they don't have anything good for you guys in terms of your areas of expertise, but they did have something last year, which I thought, for some people might be good. So there were like 2 topics that were highlighted, and I was kind of surprised that IRC was funding it. Okay, so again, if you weren't aware that maybe you do need to to open IRC website from time to time and see whether there are any ERA-nets. And because I suppose the call is closed, you can actually now go in, even if you Google this, the CRIST era, and you can go in and you can get a list of funded projects. So what was actually funded at the end. And in terms of the Marie Skłodowska-Curie calls, so what we have now, we have 2 calls open at the moment. So one is the RIS, Research and Innovation through Staff Exchange, and the deadline is the sorry, not 2017, 2019, 2nd of April 2019. So this is something that, again, might not suit all the people at their career stages, but it might suit more people who have already research teams in place. Probably a scheme that is suitable more for research centers where they actually have people to send to staff exchanges, but it's quite doable. The success rate for them is about 25%. We already have in DCU a number of successful RIS projects coordinating out of DCU. So we do have quite a, experience with them. So I'd be happy to have a chat if you're interested in putting something for that. And then the individual fellowships call, okay? So this is something that, again, remember I was talking about this research mobility, so this is what you need to consider. And it is a competitive call, okay? So it's quite, but just to give you a bit of a context for the 2018 call, the stats. So the IRIS success rate was 15%, a bit higher than the EU general, EU-wide success rate. But note that the success rate for resubmissions was actually higher, 22.7%, which means, again, because and because you already incorporated some feedback that you got in the first time round, it is possible to get funded, okay? So it's still low, but it's not, really awful, like 6%. Some ICT goals have 6% success rates. And for global fellowships, which is like remarkable, I actually think, so for this one, this is absolutely brilliant. So the 28% of the Irish proposals submitted out of Ireland or submitted with the host institutions in Ireland actually got funded. So I actually thought that that's a really, really good and much higher than the average EU level. So this is actually good because, Marie Curie has this mobility requirement. So basically you can't, if you've been here for more than 12 months, you can't apply with the same institution for a fellowship. You have to apply with a different institution. But the global fellowship, good for people, for internal people, yeah? So you can, even if you've been based here, you can go for global. So this is a non-EU, States, Japan, Canada, and so on. You can go, you can spend 2 years there, and for year 3, you come back to your host institution in Ireland, okay? So, it is a 3 year, so again, might not suit some people, but they are much better. The rate salaries are much better. So you have your research and training package, so and so on. So they are basically the rates that Marie Curie is basically like a rate of a junior lecturer in academia, which is quite good. But yeah, so think about it. So so usually the call runs in September. So the 2019 one will be sometime in September. And again, if you are a mentor, if you would like to invite someone. So this is another way of how to attract external people to your centers, your research groups, your school. Quite good. And in my experience, usually, if mentors and supervisors, participate actively with writing the proposal, so they don't just leave it to the applicant to write, but actually help writing, that's quite good and quite beneficial. Okay, so I'm just conscious of time. So this is just a couple of things in terms of collaboration, okay? So, we all know collaboration is better. Being a partner on a European funded project is much easier, and even in terms of proposal writing, it's easier. You get your work package, you write your work package, you write a bit of input into this, and, here you can go your 200K, you can get your money. So, I'm sure you've heard about Idealist, the ICT network of NCPs around Europe. So this is something, have a look. These are all links. They have a number of aids and tools there. They have a partner search. They have a toolbox on, proposal writing. They have a pre-proposal check. They run regular webinars that, you can tune in. And so, what I wanted to do is the cost action. So that's something that, again, for those people who are not familiar with, so this is the European Cooperation in Science and Technology, okay? Now, the name is a bit misleading, so it's not only for STEM, but it's actually have been expanded then since its inception, I think in the 1970s, to all disciplines, so both AHSS and STEM. But it's quite a good way, again, if you're just starting out on this, funding marathon, you know, it might be good to participate as it's basically a money for networking, okay? So it doesn't fund research as such. So for instance, it won't provide salaries for your research team members or your teaching buyout time or anything like that. But it will give you money for, you know, travel, for short scientific missions, you know, if you want to do a kind of a short secondment in an institution with expertise in certain area. So that will all go. And there is a number of ways how to participate. So you can propose your own cost action. So it's a bottom up, any topic. You can, you know, you write your application, or you can join an existing cost. So I looked up briefly on the list of current cost actions, and machine learning seems to be quite, you know, there's 2 there on machine learning. So again, you know, might not be relevant to everyone, but for those of you, maybe have a look, and you can contact the coordinator of the network and just, you know, get on board as an IRIS representative. Usually with cost actions, the earlier you do that, the better, yeah, because they kind of, you know, once they have a representative from one country, I suppose that country is kind of taken, so they might guess you as a substitute, but then, you know, you might not be involved in every activity. Okay, so I'm just conscious of time, so it's 11 o'clock, so I don't know. I mean, I have a few more slides, and I mean, I'm going to circulate this as a PDF, so you can have a look. So the only thing what I wanted to flag is that, you know, we do have our webpage where we have our resources and a number of templates as well. So definitely, you know, have a look. Like, you know, people kind of ring us and, oh, what's our PIC number? What's this DCU's VAT number? Everything is there. You know, there is like information there, and you can have a look. I mean, we will tell you what's our PIC number and what's our VAT number, but it's actually there, so it's public. So there's a number of templates. So have a look, yeah. So research professional. Okay, so this is my contact details. So feel free to get in touch with me, and I'll be happy to help you with whatever query you have. If anyone needs to leave, do leave. Yeah, and Graham, now if you could just give a few words about your. Thanks very much. All 3 kids, you know, she has 3 kids now. She moved with everyone. Her husband is Sam, because he has the company. But the 3 kids, she started doing graphic design.
Okay, my name is Graham Healy, and you might know me as the new assistant professor here in the School of Computing. And I'm going to talk about my experience with getting my first Enterprise Ireland Innovation Partnership Programme. So to sort of give, this is like the lowdown on my EI-IPP. So what did I get? Well, I got an Enterprise Ireland Innovation Partnership Programme grant. The value of the first tranche for the pilot study was almost €9,000. And then for the actual main part of the grant as well, that was closer to 108,000. So this was done in 2 parts. So EI offered, or it was possible to be able to go straight into the main grant, but I decided with the company, and we decided it would be best to do this in 2 parts. So that was to do a pilot study for 6 months. So the idea is there was a few hours spent in every week being able to communicate with the company, them sharing back over some data, and it gave us some opportunity to be able to form an idea rather than jumping head in and not knowing how it would turn out. So I found that to be a very useful exercise. And then for the actual main part of the grant of the project was about 12 months. So the aim of this was for us to develop data analytics and machine learning capability to be able to use Facebook metadata. So the idea is that this could be brought into the company's product offerings so they could offer it to clients. So some of the things, let's say, I learned or I noticed throughout this process was The pilot study was most definitely very useful to be able to do with the company in advance that EI were happy to be able to pay for. So this was good because it gave us some time to think about what we wanted to do, that we weren't rushed or pressured under some deadline. It was a good way to be able to test the water with the interaction with the company as well, just to see how well we would be able to work together. And then most importantly, to be able to make a plan of what we wanted to target for that 12-month period then following on that. What was particularly useful about that, I suppose, from EI's perspective, is that in the first pilot part of this, it was effectively a low-cost investment just to be able to facilitate us to work together, to know whether this was going to be risky or not. But it also meant after the 6 months, when we had come back to EI looking for a larger amount of money, we were able to show some track record. I was able to point out, well, they had given across some data, I was able to process, they got back some results from this. So it just meant from the, I suppose, from the go of the second part of the project, it was very encouraging from EI's perspective that you were able to see, well, hey, they've worked together for 6 months and nothing has gone terribly wrong, and they are working well together and coming up with an idea of what they wish to do. Other things that I found or I noticed or learned throughout the process, I suppose, and it's quite general advice, is that it's quite important to be able to stick to the agreed plan. So this is one thing I noticed happening throughout the project, is that there was scope change, and it often starts off quite small at first. And in reality, this is due to things just changing, situation change and context change. And it was very important to have contingencies about what to do when they occurred. So for instance, we discovered early on in the project, because of the Cambridge Analytica scandal, there was a big issue about getting access to Facebook metadata and being able to use it. So it meant we had to rework the project a little bit on the fly as we were going along. But it was quite important to be able to get that encoded or recorded down in an agreement for any changes that we made, because things happen on the other side in the company. So for instance, people in the company begin to change roles. So the person you were initially dealing with might have taken on new responsibilities, particularly if it's an early company or a startup. So there could be some confusion down the line that one person in the company thinks that they're going to originally get what was on the grant, even though it was, let's say, informally discussed that, well, we're going to have to reshape that grant in a different direction of the work that we're going to do. So something that I found very important throughout this process is to always agree on a plan, make sure it's recorded and it's formalized that there has been a change in this way. Other things that I found very useful throughout the process was to rely on knowledge and processes in the research centre. The research centres and the people involved are very well equipped to be able to deal with various situations that might arise. I would have been, let's say, for a better word, lost in an awful lot of this process without being able to lean on other people's knowledge or experience. I haven't stepped through this. So research centres have typically encountered lots of maybe even the exact same type of grant, and they have good practices and processes as to how these things should be handled, that things don't really go off track. I suppose in terms of other learnings throughout this process that I particularly found for this grant anyway, it was very important to have regular communication with the company. So we would always have a weekly call, and that was very important to keep things on track, because it's not even about, let's say, I losing track in the interaction with the company. They can lose track of what they were meant to do. So it was a very easy way to give a poke. Do you have that data, or is that server up and working yet, or this type of thing. It just keeps things moving along at a consistent pace, and it gives an opportunity for any issues that might arise to be able to be flagged. Because I know some other people, let's say working with industry and grants, there might be a month between meetings, and if you only have a 12-month project and some issue has cropped up, it might take 1 or 2 of these meetings of where they're provoked to take some action for something for it to actually happen, which means that a few months could pass, and that's fairly detrimental overall to the aims of the work that you're trying to do. In terms of other learnings throughout this, I found it was very useful to spend some time on site with the company as well. It just allowed some opportunity to be able to interact with a wider number of staff and people on the other side to be able to get perspectives. So overall, I found this to be a positive experience, particularly to be able to develop or to be able to get my first piece of research funding to demonstrate that I could carry out a project from its inception all the way to its delivery and reporting and end. My part is quite short, so if I could ask anybody has any questions.
The pilot funding you mentioned there, was that was the larger chunk guaranteed, or was it dependent on the pilot funding?
The pilot funding was intended to facilitate, so maybe you want to work with a company but you don't really have a solid plan on what you want to do. So the idea of the pilot funding is effectively to cover the time to put together the grant. Okay. But the actual grant itself is quite short. I more took this as it was an opportunity to demonstrate you could work well with the company and you have some clear problem that you want to solve.
Did you find there much of an understanding in the company of how research is conducted in the university? Was there any problems with that, or did it flow okay? Was there an education element to it?
Yeah, I'd say there was. Like sometimes there could be something of a slight mismatch between, because an awful lot of people, let's say, who are working in the industry and have only worked in industry, they're not necessarily appreciating the research perspective that's brought to this or the value you're bringing. So it was very important at an early point in discussions to make it clear that you're not being hired as a staff member that can be reallocated to other types of work within the company. Like, you are working from the university, you are doing research, but it is industry focused in this way. So that was an important dynamic or relationship to maintain throughout that time period.
So after that, would you do another one?
Yeah, I would. It was a good experience, and I've learned a lot. And just being able to going through the process and being able to deal with some of the types of issues that crop up.
Can you talk about what was the kind of the partnership with the company with respect to the intellectual sharing of the property, or like some kind of paper writing, or like?
Yeah, sure. In respect to this grant, the work that would have been done with the company, of course I can't talk about details of what was specifically done because it is going to be built into a product. So let's say in respect to the actual transfer of intellectual property or that being managed, that was one nice thing. The facilities offered, let's say, by DCU via the Invent Centre and RIS, an awful lot of, let's say, the legal mumbo jumbo further down is handled by them, because that's something, let's say, as an early researcher, somebody who's taken on one of these grants, it's just not going to be equipped to be able to negotiate with a company or royalties or things like this. That's a complex arena in itself. So there's a lot of support and systems around like that. In terms of, let's say, a paper output, the company weren't necessarily too interested in having a paper output, and so effectively they've shared over client data to be processed, let's say, to build algorithms. They don't want to publicize that to everybody else, that like, here's how we done it, you can go ahead and copy it now. So that was another something that was carefully considered throughout the process. But I know of other innovation partnerships where the company was, let's say, keen to have a publication because it gives some effectively advertisement for the company as well. In this case, they weren't. Any other questions?
One more question. In the lead up to this, did you have much of an interaction with EI? Like, as Katia said, you talked to EI first, you talked to the commercialization for the guys in EI. Were you doing the same thing?
Yeah, so I suppose the steps of this were, step number one would have been talking with Paddy O'Byle in Invent, because he had a good bit of experience with these types of grants. And it was actually Paddy who advised, rather than trying to jump directly into putting together a large proposal, just to do a pilot study, because you don't know what you don't know. And it was definitely useful, let's say, in that pilot study, the interaction with the company. But as soon as we had like the semblance of a project put together, we had then began contacting Enterprise Ireland even before we submitted the main proposal, to ask whether they wanted to come out to DCU to have a meeting and step through and discuss. So it was quite useful in that process, was to be able to show some of the results of the pilot study, to be able to show that there was some due diligence done in terms of looking at data and just sensibly thinking through the steps that had to happen to achieve, let's say, this larger part of the project or this 12-month phase.
Sorry, how did you organize that in terms of 6 months and 12 months? Did you hire any research assistant, or who worked on this?
No, for the 6 months it would have been let's say, not solely focused on. I think it paid for about 1 day a week to be able to have this interaction. In terms of the actual 12-month project, I would have hired in a postdoc for a few months as well, who would have had skills in machine learning and data analytics. So the idea was, like, when we initially, let's say, applied for this, I would have put in the funding for a 6-month period for a postdoc, so to help with some of that, effectively the heavy lifting in terms of having to do implementation and coding of some of the things within it. So there was money, let's say, covered within that to be able to hire either a half-time postdoc or a full-time postdoc for 6 months. I took the full-time approach where I seen it was critical in the project.
But for the pilot, you didn't,
No.
wasn't too much
No.
task?
No, it was just really to test the water and interact with the company. Like, there was no specific end goal of the actual pilot study. It wasn't to deliver a prototype product or anything. It was literally to fund the interaction, to be able to put a proposal together. So it's effectively stated by EI as a path for moving into a larger grant, and it was indicated to me at the time as well. It's a process they like to see. It just shows that you've done your due diligence to the situation to understand that you're not jumping head in first and not knowing what you're doing. As they seem to like that you have a very clear type of a clear plan, a time schedule, deliverables and stuff like this. So it just gives the opportunity to be able to get that together. For me anyway, that's what I felt.
In regards to your experience having written the proposal, what would you recommend to researchers who might be thinking of looking into applying in the same, using the same funding body in terms of experience? What would you
particularly for the early stage, to be able to have some type of a concrete plan with the company. Like it's very easy for somebody, or particularly if you're meeting a multitude of people from a company, you could be meeting somebody that's on the marketing side, somebody that's on the tech side, and they'll all have very different ideas and they can all be quite ambitious. So it's very important, I found, to be realistically calibrated about what can be done. So instantly, even in these early conversations, when people were throwing out large ideas that, well, let's say we don't have the resource to be able to do both A, B and C. So back to the company, which would you rather do if you were to rank? Well, they say, well, we want to do A and B. Okay, let's begin putting together like a time schedule for this. Let's begin thinking of like purely in logistics and deliverables, and let's say what data and resources we'll need from you, what guarantees that you can give of being able to give, let's say, this particular data or GPU time or something like this. But I instantly tried to bring everything back to logistics to be able to have a plan and an early point. I found that was very useful to be able to, one, calibrate expectations, and then secondly, to be able to ensure the success of the project. Because some people can see this as open-ended. You can, they see that you could just change the plan as you're moving along maybe, and it'll adapt and somehow it'll all work itself out. Personally, I don't like working like that. I like to have a plan as to how things will move along. So I think already laying down the plan in the pilot study and putting timeframes to things and contingencies and just purely bringing or distilling that down into logistics, I found to be a very useful process to calibrate their expectations and ensure success of the project.
Thank you.
Any final questions maybe for Kathy as well?
Yeah. So you talk about the research support offices and like the information that is there. It's also some kind of a portal, let's say, where we can find, let's say, because some of the, I guess, the budget applications are public and some are not, where we can find some kind of successful application, like the budget, like the proposal which we accepted, so that we can have a look.
Okay, so the successful proposals, I mean, there are obviously, you know, so we don't post it on the website, okay? So, and we, in order for us to be able to share the copy of the successful proposal, we need to first obtain the permission from the person, okay, for obvious reasons, you know, IP and so on. So we do have a stock of successful proposals that the PIs actually gave us the green light to kind of, yeah, go ahead, you know, circulate. But we have it in our own file. So what we do whenever you know, depending on the call, and if I talk to an applicant and if they say it, I might send it to them. But we don't have it on the website just because it's just, you know, you never know who's going to access it and so on. So, but yeah, if you have a particular call in mind, so the best way to do it, to get in touch with me, and then I'll let you know if we have something or not.
Yeah. In regards to the researchers who are in the early stages of their career, maybe 4 years and below, based on all those, you know, the funding bodies you are recommending, you went through, which ones would you recommend for the early career stages to focus on? Because some.
So you see, I'll go back to my idea. You know, what's your research idea? So I think that should be the main factor in decision on, you know, what funding body to apply. I mean, you can consider in terms of success rates, you know, which one, where it's easier to get. But I think you do need to, you know. So I suppose the main thing is that, okay, your idea and what you're trying to do. Yeah. So is it a feasibility study? Is it a pilot study, or is it a, you know, implementation of, you know, you already have a kind of a seed money, and then you can do, and then you can go and work with. I mean, in terms of success rates, I mean, they're all quite competitive. So I can't say, you know, the IRC, for instance, the laureate one seems to be the new one. It looks like when the funders launched the new call, obviously because less people know about it, it's kind of there's a bit of a, you know, an advantage there that you can get it. But always the second time around, it's more and more competitive. Okay, so, but yeah, so I still think, you know, if it's a fellowship, so there are a number of courses you can apply, and you can apply to a couple of them. So, you know, the worst case scenario is that you'll get two and you have to choose which one you want, and you can always, you know, decline one and get the other one. So you can do that as well. You know, yeah. So sorry, I don't have an answer in terms of which fund to target definitely, but
not really even to target, like, you know, like some of them I think they look too big for beginners.
Well, I suppose if you're talking about SFI, I mean, obviously, you know, the future frontiers, I mean, that's something that is kind of at the level. So if you're just starting out, maybe the starting investigator grant would be the one that is, you know, for your career stage would be the most relevant one, or you know, so that's something. And as well, yeah. So there are, you know, and usually if you look at eligibility criteria that the funder specifies, you know, you will have an idea whether this call is for you or not, you know, so because sometimes they specify the number of publications that you have to have. So I mean, that's something quite explicit. So if you don't have that, obviously don't go for it, you know. So that's probably the starting point, you know, have a look at the scheme, and then if you're not sure, you know, look at the eligibility criteria and just see what's the funder's wish list in terms of, you know, the applications, the candidates that are going to apply. And then if you're in any doubt, you know, let me know, and we can then figure it out ourselves, you know, so because sometimes it's not as clear. Thank you.
Okay, let's thank Patty again. And I'm sure if you have any questions that we can pass them on to Patty.
Yeah, definitely. So
video will be available. We'll put it up on the school website, videos. And the slides will be available.
Yes, I will. So will I send it to you, and then you will circulate.
And thank you very much
okay,
again. I'm sure we'll have more, do more along the way. So thank you very much for your time.